Hi, this is Greg Kesich. I'm the editorial page editor at the Portland Press Herald, and we are here for a special reader comments podcast. And we actually have an in-studio guest, Kathy McCulka of Cape Elizabeth. Now, Kathy is our letter writer of the month for the month of June. For a letter we published, Raising the Diploma Bar Slams Doors, and it was about a proficiency diploma for requirement for Maine high school graduates. Kathy, you did one of my favorite things. You wrote a letter to the editor, and it was a really interesting, provocative one. So thanks so much for making the time to come in.
Happy to be here.
So tell me a little bit about what prompted you to write us.
Well, I've been watching actually the headlines in the news for decades now saying our schools are failing. We need to do something to make our schools better. And I'm in the schools, and I know that they are not failing. And a lot of the reporting is based on international tests and federal tests. And first of all, the data shows that in the international tests, we're not failing; we are improving. And on the federal tests, the original Common Core tests, especially at the elementary level, were developmentally inappropriate. So I'm working with students. I work with students who are taking a little longer to learn to read, and I'm testing them with authentic testing. They read a book, it's timed, I ask them questions about it, they tell me what the author's message was. I think you'd be very impressed with these children in second and third grade, but they're having trouble passing federal tests, especially computerized tests. So I think we have to talk about this fact that our schools aren't failing, because I think that's the kind of the root from all the branches that are growing in the reform movement, that the schools are failing.
Can I back you up a little bit? Because the letter was in response to stories about a proficiency-based diploma for Maine students. And it's sort of I think they use the word competency, basic competency.
Right.
Which is defined as a B average.
Well, that's part of the problem. See, so the competency-based diploma is coming from, okay, if the schools are failing, let's raise the bar. But really...
So what's wrong with that? I think a lot of people would say, yeah, let's raise the bar.
Well, yes, except children can jump as high as they want over the bar, except for the children who are struggling. So if we raise the bar for everyone, if they do not get a diploma because they can't get a B in 8 subjects, the children that we thought we were going to help are going to leave school without a diploma. So a competency-based diploma, which really has not been defined. It is different. Every district, one of the reasons for the competency-based diploma was for consistency, so that an A in Bangor would be the same as an A in Portland.
I mean, how would you ever be able to establish that?
Well, other states do it. New York has Regents exams, so they have a statewide curriculum, and then they have statewide tests. It's one test, whereas in Maine, one of the commissioners, we've had a few, so it was 2 or 3 commissioners ago, in an interview said, when he was questioned, well, who is writing the tests? He said, oh, well, every district gets to write their own test. Right. So that right there says there is no consistency unless you have one statewide test.
Is this a result of the standards movement?
Yes and no. There's no problem with raising standards. The problem was that it instead of professional development to raise the standards, it went to all testing all the time. Mm-hmm. No Child Left Behind started testing children every year. And as I say, they're difficult tests. The testing is always the focus, and that's the focus now with the competency-based diploma. It's testing, and as I say, it hasn't been defined. Even the state ed, the last time I spoke to them, said, well, we think maybe it'll be 80 or 85 will be passing. Well, I know probably almost everybody in this room maybe got 1 C in their life in high school. And so you
that was a cause for celebration in my house when I pulled in the C.
Yes. well, you would not have gotten a diploma.
No.
So those children, that's what I saw. I said to them, so what is going to happen to the children who don't get a diploma? And the answer was, well, we're not sure, but we think maybe they'll get a certificate of attendance. Well, I have to say that that a child with a certificate of attendance, I call that an ed zombie, because they're going to be walking around without a diploma and they will not even get a job interview.
Yeah, I know. That's one thing that really struck me in your letter was you talked about the C student. You're not going to help or hurt by raising the standard.
Exactly.
But you really do hurt the child who is working very hard, probably working in many cases harder than the B student.
Exactly. Yes. And Educate Maine, I believe, who was the group who actually, I believe, brought the idea of competency-based diploma to Maine, is now talking about career technical education and really beefing up career technical education, which is something that they do in Europe. If you're a C student or a D student.
Or even a B student.
Oh, true.
Yeah,
even
yeah,
an
yeah.
A student may want to be a plumber or an electrician. But our level of education, our technical education, isn't that high yet. And I think they put the cart before the horse. If we're going to by 2020 have to start have this very high standard, we really should have the technical education or something to some safety net for the students who cannot attain a B in 8 subjects.
Mm-hmm. Or what about adding a credential to a diploma for students who achieve at a higher level? I don't know, like they do in universities with magna cum laude and have other distinctions added to a diploma.
Sure, that's a great idea. That is a movement that's happening now so that more than 1 or 2 students can get that distinction. But it isn't the children at the upper end that we're really worried about. It is that safety net that we need for the children at the lower level. And it's been said that we're building the plane as we're flying, and I'd like to add to that I don't even think we know where we're going yet with competency-based diploma. Why is Maine doing this? Mm-hmm. That's what I'd like to know. Why, when it hasn't been defined? Why are we the first state? It's a little bit surprising that the legislature passed this when really no educators were involved in explaining what it was. And it's going to grow into personalized education, which is computers, keeping track of children's scores, and children don't have to they're talking about not having to spend seat time. You can pass a course on the computer and move on. So it's very complicated, and I don't think it's been thought through enough before the law was passed. And I do think it will be amended because the really important thing here is I think it's going to increase the dropout rate.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably likely, right?
Yes, I do think it's likely as students have to retake a course again and again, retake tests again and again, and if they can't pass it, then I really think that will increase the dropout rate. Or it will take them 5 years to complete a diploma, and that's not a very good deal for taxpayers.
Have you ever written a letter to the editor before?
The last time I think I wrote a letter to the editor was to this paper about 45 years ago when Bill Ginn was head of Audubon Society and we were working for the bottle bill. And that was my first letter to the editor, and this may be my second.
You pushed it over the top, I guess. Well, don't make us wait so long next time. This was a very good letter, and we're very happy to get it. And thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
If you want to write a letter to the editor, please email it to letterstotheeditor, all one word, at pressherald.com. So we're back with the assistant editorial page editor, Sarah Collins.
Hello.
And Jim Patrick, who is a new voice to our podcast. He's our social media editor.
Hello, Gregory.
And so good to see you, Jim.
Fabulous to be here.
We work in adjoining offices, but we never actually interact. Jim does a lot of work with our reader comments, and the big grousing you often hear in the newsroom is that people say, don't read the reader comments, and if you ever try to respond to a reader, they say, yeah, I told you not to do that. But Jim, I understand that you think comments are good.
You know, I actually do think comments are good, and here's why. We learn things from people in the comments section. I would say there's a situation once a week where we hear something in the comments that we did not know, or an aspect of a story that we didn't report correctly. And an example yesterday, we had a headline about an AP story. We'd, of course, never mess up a locally written story, but there was an article from the AP Wire, and the headline on our website is about a military crash in Mississippi, and our headline said, "Jet crash," and a commenter immediately pointed out it was not a jet. It was a C-130, that is a cargo plane, a cargo plane that has 4 propeller engines. So we immediately, I thanked the person as the Portland Press Herald, and we immediately changed the story to reflect that it was not a jet; it was a cargo plane. So we learned.
Or propeller plane.
Yeah, a propeller plane.
They obviously never covered the Brunswick Naval Air Station.
Right. Clearly,
yeah.
somebody who put that story on our website just didn't read as many Tom Clancy books as I have.
I don't know. What do you think, Sarah? Is it worth it?
I think that there are diamonds in the vast, rubble. Probably the Facebook comments are generally more substantive than the ones on the website proper, possibly because people are signing their names to them, and have avatars. And is that, I don't know how much tracking of the website comments do you do, or do you just look at them when they get flagged?
I look at website comments throughout the day. They're one of my priorities, and I would say anybody on our website would tell you that we are routinely looking at comments regardless of if they're flagged. And I feel like we're, let me make my case. I'm not saying that the comments on Facebook or on our website are particularly enlightening or particularly civil. I would say that they have dramatically improved over the last year, and you can actually sometimes have a civil discussion either on Facebook or on our website. And it's a process of educating the people who are commenting to let them know what's expected of them, and it's enforcing those standards consistently. And we don't, I got a pro tip to any of your podcast listeners: if you want to throw terrible comments past us, just wake up at 3 a.m. and post comments. But outside of that time slot, we are pretty well on top of things.
The major offenders didn't need that information. They already know. It's amazing how
there are several that have caught on, and I'm not going to give them I'm not going to give them a pat on the back by naming their usernames right now. But there are a couple of them that will seem to make much worse comments at times that we are less likely to be paying attention to the comments section.
I think there's something going on in terms of how much people expect to be able to interact with the news. There's much more of an expectation that they that they answer back, and that there's a place for them to answer back. And the comments are one of the areas. Clearly the Facebook and Twitter, less so with Twitter. Twitter tends to be sort of one-to-one communications in public, but Sarah and I are just deluged with letters.
And you would think that with all the platforms people have to express their opinion that letters would have trailed off, but, not so.
Right, because we don't let people be mean. Right. We don't, letter writers, online commenters.
They can't call people names. We require that they source their facts.
And they have to sign their name. That's the other thing, is there's no anonymity.
Has that gotten more difficult as social media has sort of eroded conversational norms and people feel more free to be insulting?
Yeah, the letters, the letters that we don't publish can be very harsh.
And did that happen 20 years ago or 15 years ago?
I don't think so. My former colleague, M.D. Harmon, told me that when he started on these pages in the 80s, they would run about 2 or 3 letters a day, and that was all they got. Pretty much any letter was sent in, they would publish it. And I don't think we're publishing half of the letters that come in.
No, maybe we're publishing a third.
And part of that might be, although our circulation numbers obviously are not skyrocketing, there are more people reading our content today than there were 20 years ago. And whether it's social media or our website or the print edition, people can find us a number of different ways, and you might be getting more thoughts that way by just, we're out there quite a bit now where there wasn't that many ways to access our content 20 years ago.
Well, speaking of finding, we found Jim Fossell, who was one of our
there he is.
Sunday columnists. Jim, we don't usually get you down here for these tapings because you're a hardworking guy in Central Maine.
Right, I could finally make it down.
Right.
Good to be here in person for a change instead of over the phone.
Yeah, and so Jim, you've been writing for us for a couple of months now.
Yeah, for a couple of months now.
And how are you finding the reader comments?
I pay a lot more attention to the direct emails that I get than I do to the Facebook comments or the website, just because I don't have as much time during the day to check things as you do, obviously, because that's your job. Yeah. But I find that I've gotten some very good emails, including from some state legislators and from some very bright people, as responses, direct responses to the column. Democrats and Republicans.
Do you pay attention to the volume of the response you get?
Yeah, I mean, I got a ton at first. Then it kind of tapered off. Then I got a lot last week about the budget column.
I was going to ask, what's the balance between...
Did you bring any with you?
I actually haven't gotten that many really negative comments, only 2 or 3. But they are usually amusing. I usually try to respond as politely as possible because that seems to annoy them more than anything.
Right, it diffuses them.
Yes, exactly.
I write about beer, and every time I write about beer, there's 2 or 3 people who want to go back to the days of Prohibition that comment immediately on our website, and beer is horrible, and you're just glorifying a terrible culture, and everybody's an alcoholic that drinks beer. And every time I read those, I don't know about you, Jim, but when I can tell the tone is going to be just ridiculously negative, my brain shuts off. I stop reading the comment for all intents and purposes.
That's usually what I tend to do, but when I get the emails directly, that takes a little bit more effort, so I try to reply to most of those.
Yeah, I used to reply recently that I'm going to try to save, where it said, usually I try to respond to everything people write me, but in this case, I think I'm just going to reflect on what you had to say.
You've given me a lot to think about.
You raised a really good point in a very civil... I don't have to contemplate that overnight.
I throw a lot of stuff your way, too. When people are complaining online, I'll say, well, you can always message Greg.
Yeah.
Greg loves to get emails. Greg always responds to emails.
Typically, what we get is the really nice comment, thoughtful comment comes as an email. And then, you are scum comment goes up online for the world to see. When Western civilization is in its final decline, it will not be the terrorists who did this. It will be useful idiots like Kesich. It's like, wow, somebody thinks I'm really important.
Yeah, at least it's useful.
Yeah, it was useful. He said I'm useful. Yeah.
What I think is interesting is the people, and this goes to the Facebook comments and online comments as well, who clearly only read the headline and the summary of the article and didn't actually read the entire article at all.
I will quote to people, as the Portland Press Herald on Facebook, directly from the story what they missed out. If they're completely wrong, and I don't do it to be a jerk or I just want to make sure if we're having a discussion, let's have a discussion about the actual facts rather than you saying something that is 100% incorrect.
Of course, a new way to troll now on Facebook is just with emoji reactions.
I want to figure out a way to ban. I want to ban the there's a middle finger emoji. I need to figure out a way to.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a real advance in our civilization.
Classy.
If there's one
Classy.
emoji that I wish I could just have automatically deleted from our page, it would be the middle finger emoji. Because I guess the goal is always some semblance of civil discussion of an issue, at least where we're just not making personal attacks against each other. And a middle finger is pretty much the definition of not civil. There's almost no context unless somebody's saying, to the state legislators who overlooked all of our votes on ballot issues, here's a big middle finger. That would maybe sort of...
Metaphorically suitable, yeah.
Yeah, but almost in no instance is it civil. So, yeah, it's a tough world out there.
Do you want to go to comments?
Yeah.
So, Sarah, did you pick out any special favorite comments?
Yeah. We got some interesting reactions to the editorial on Tuesday about responding to how the legislature whiffed this session on the state's opioid crisis. A reader named Yarmouth1.
Oh, please. Until the state can stop someone from physically pumping drugs into their bodies, no budget stalemate will prevent opioid deaths. The PPH got it wrong. It isn't heroin's killer grip on Maine, it's Mainer's killer grip on heroin.
So the personal responsibility.
That's the classic argument. I mean, that's what bogged the response to this crisis down, is the idea that people should be punished, or not punished, but they should suffer the consequences of their choices versus they're sick.
Right.
I don't know how anybody can look at the statistics that say 60 to 70% of opioid addicts started as medical prescriptions. Right. I don't know how anybody can see that statistic and then say, you know, you just got to grit your teeth and bear the pain there, and not be an opioid addict. Well, when a doctor hands you a prescription, you go get that
You're
prescription.
supposed to be able to trust your doctor. Yeah, exactly. And we have a clear and identifiable source of this problem. We need to address it responsibly, not pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah. But not pretend that you can just grit your teeth and not be an addict.
The other thing that blows me away is the very low number of people who get addicted who take opioids, either for medical reasons or otherwise. It's not sort of an automatic thing that if you, the way somebody explained to me once is absolutely everybody will develop a dependence if they're given the opportunity, given taking these drugs. But only a very small subset actually becomes addicted to the point that we've been reading about that's led to all this carnage.
There are people who are genetically predisposed or who grow up in circumstances where they're more.
They've got some pain,
right?
They're treating some pain that's not necessarily apparent.
You look at the brief bios we did in our Lost series about some of the people who've died in the past few years, and you just see depression, PTSD, rape survivors, people who are bullied. These aren't people who are taking the drug for kicks.
Right. It didn't start at a party one night, which is, I think there's a connotation that this is something that started a bad choice at a party, or you were partying one night. That's generally not how this goes down.
Or even if it did, it became an addiction for a reason. Yeah.
So here's an interesting thing, right? Here, there's the four of us are all pretty much convinced that this writer is wrong, and that's been the case with our editorials. Most of our op-eds take that side of the issue. There is a significant number of people, including enough people in the legislature that prevented any kind of program to move forward this year, who feel the same way as that commenter. Yarmouth 1 is not alone. Is that a time when, like, the reader comments give a place for some kind of alternate viewpoint and
that's a great point about the ACA repeal effort that's going on in the Senate, and we have stories about today's editorial where people are arguing the flip side of issues, and it does give people a voice in the process, and we may not agree with that voice, but we certainly don't want to squelch that voice out, and we want to give people the opportunity to argue, and again, argue in a civil way, preferably. I don't even require that it be fact-based. Go ahead and make an argument and have it be based on your intuitions, but keep things civil, and I feel like that bar remains too high for some people to jump over yet, which is unfortunate.
So I got one too. Here's a comment from my column of today about healthcare costs, and it's from a reader named Bowdoin 81.
I envision a system where we don't confuse insurance with health care, and instead allow American ingenuity to devise all kinds of new technologies, services, and collaboratives to help people pay for their needed care. Incentives would play out at the level of patient-doctor rather than system, but we'll never get there while advocates like Mr. Kesich pine for such wasteful, backwards, 20th century solutions as insurance for all.
Right. And in response, we heard from the excellently named commenter, Elvis is Dead.
How does one pay for, say, years of life-saving chemotherapy if that costs hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars? I know a guy, a Vietnam vet with Agent Orange-related leukemia, with just one of his many medications to stay alive costs $40,000 annually. Paid for by the VA, and I don't see any problem with that.
So that was a good exchange, I thought, and there was actually a lot on that column. Yeah, where people actually appeared to be listening to each other and responding to each other, which I don't always see.
Your columns seem to attract that element out of people.
Not necessarily.
Well, maybe it's because you're a face and people know who you are. You were an easy target to skewer, as it were, and you too, Jim, for that matter. You know, your face. My face isn't on something. People don't. And granted, again, I'm writing about beer. Most people are happy to talk about beer, but
it feels more personal to people when they can see your face.
Yeah. Although some beer people get very personal about that issue too. So
yeah. So have you noticed people having discussions on your stories, either in our comments or on Facebook, that you would say are having a civil discussion where maybe somebody's learning something?
Like I said, I tend to focus more on the direct emails that I get. I'm going to have to pay more attention to the web comments and see what the kind of reactions are. The first few columns, it seemed like there was a lot more emails than there were comments anywhere. I think now that I've been there for a little bit, few months now, there are probably more comments that I'm missing that I should check on.
Do you guys, and this is open to everybody, do you guys think people are open-minded enough to learn things in the comments section, or are people going in there with a helmet on and they're not prepared to hear a viewpoint that doesn't match their own viewpoint?
I've seen people in the comments say, "Oh, I didn't know that. I haven't seen it that often. I don't see it every day." But there are people on both the left and the right who are willing to say, "You've said something that I didn't know. Thanks for enlightening me."
Yeah, I would say yes and yes. Some people don't want to hear any other points of view, and some people really do want to hear what the other side is thinking. I think in many ways we're farther apart than the media thinks that we are, and in some ways we're not nearly as far apart as they think we are. So I think there's definitely people out there who are willing to listen and learn.
A few years ago, I used to say that the only place in America left where people who disagreed with each other politically actually interacted was in the newspaper, on the opinion pages, and now I'm not even sure that's true, or at least not as true as it used to be. I think there's so many ways that people can segregate themselves and put them in a comfortable place, and a lot of what I see on the comments is just sort of warfare. People whose job it is to tear down Republicans or to tear down liberals, and then it often happens in the best exchanges often happen in stories or commentaries that aren't already politicized, where there's a little bit of a wiggle room where people can actually sort of respond to something.
I will say the thing that's interesting about my job that I find the most interesting is stories that take off that you on Facebook or the internet in general, stories that do well that you would never predict this story, this AP Wire story about a whale allegedly killing a guy out in the Gulf of Maine. You'd never predict that would do really well out in the world, but it was one of our top stories yesterday.
I would have predicted that.
Well,
a whale kills a guy.
And every now and then I'll throw something out there like, "Oh, Fossell's really tossing bombs today," on his column, and that'll surely get some traction. And then you put it out there, and crickets, just crickets.
And then sometimes I do a relatively, easygoing column, and people jump in all over it. But I know some things always get reaction. Usually, I haven't done one for you yet, but usually gun pieces get reactions from people.
Oh yeah.
Mentioning the word guns will get.
Right. We could actually do a public service and just publish the word gun and let people comment on that. Sarah, did you have another one?
Yeah. A response today from Mid-Coast Gator to a letter from an infectious disease and addiction specialist who talks about the life-saving benefits of the Affordable Care Act.
Doctor, if you think healthcare is a fundamental right, not a privilege, how about we put you on a government salary, give your family health insurance through the exchange, and load you up with 30 new patients daily? Do that for a few months with people whose priorities are eating Cheetos, smoking cigs, and drinking Mad Dog 2020, and who expect the rest of us to pay for their bad habits and get back to us. We all agree that society should take care of these physically or mentally unable to care for themselves, but picking our pockets for the cash to pay for those who can work and contribute is not the way. Everybody needs to have skin in the game, including Medicaid patients who should still have a $5 copay for a doc visit, $1 copay for a script, and a $50 copay for an ER visit that is non-emergency.
Once more again on the personal responsibility theme, that if we did enough preventive healthcare education, that people would be healthier and that you wouldn't drive up healthcare costs and the ACA wouldn't be needed.
I would point out that government employees are least affected by the Obamacare completely. Like, it hasn't affected my life at all because I have employee health insurance. So as a government employee, I really have no skin in this at all because the state pays for my health insurance.
What he's saying is really an argument for the universal primary care. Is what happens when you go to the doctor? The doctor says, lose a few pounds. You shouldn't, do you smoke? Do you drink? The kind of interventions a regular access to the healthcare system pays for is what keeps people from getting these chronic illnesses that are really expensive to treat.
Yeah, this doctor talked about end-stage interventions that are needed, like foot amputations for diabetics, and the very, very expensive but very effective new drug for hepatitis C.
Well, and one of the interesting things about both of these comments, this and the last one, is that they do have a point that health insurance really isn't insurance the way that everything else is insurance. Most other things that are insurance are used for extreme events. When you get into a car accident, then your car company will pay for your new car, not paying for gasoline, paying for day-to-day repairs, paying for a dent that you pick up in the parking lot. Health insurance covers everything. It doesn't really function as insurance. The real issue here is addressing the cost of the care, and then nobody will really care how we pay for it.
I know a lot of healthcare providers, and I feel like I can argue the conservative standpoint on this issue, and yet there's that part of me that says, shouldn't everybody in case of cancer not have their lives ruined, or shouldn't anybody in case of HIV/AIDS be able to afford the medications?
Well, it's there's a lot of weird market distortions built into the way we pay for things. And the thing I keep coming back to is the way when the price of gas goes down, people drive fewer miles. They drive more miles. It goes up. Miles driven goes up, the price of gas goes up, miles driven goes down. Have you ever heard anybody say, hey, $2.29 at the pump, I'm going an extra 10 today? Like, nobody thinks that way, yet because of the incentive, as an aggregate, we do it. We drive less when the price of gas is higher. And if we have a healthcare system that pays different amounts for different people and different conditions, you're going to get more of the thing that you pay for and less of the thing that you don't pay for. And it's just that's the way the world works. And I don't think we think about it. It becomes a moral issue about whether healthcare is a right or whether personal responsibility is more important than charity. But it's really a math question. It's really an economic issue. We have this many people. All of them are going to need health care at some point. How do we provide that?
Right, and that's why I say the real issue is the cost and not who pays for it. If we reduce the costs, then it won't matter whether we have single-payer health insurance or a complete free market system. Nobody cares about the rates of homeowners insurance because homeowners insurance is cheap. But we care about the rates of health insurance because healthcare is expensive. If healthcare were more affordable, then we could go to almost any system that paid for it because if the cost isn't an object, then the payment isn't an object either.
Well, we all agree again.
Shocking.
I think that we might.
I tried to argue a conservative.
I always feel guilty when I agree with you, Greg.
We're gonna ruin your reputation, Fossell. Thank you for coming down, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Signing off.
This is a Press Herald podcast. You can hear past episodes at pressherald.com/podcasts. You can subscribe on iTunes, on Android devices, and stream on Stitcher. Please email comments and questions to letterstotheeditor@pressherald.com. Thank you for listening.